In Spotlight, the night sky could soon get a little more crowded. Chinese scientists are planning to launch an artificial moon into orbit by 2020. They say it's all part of a plan to save money on electricity. Chinese officials say the moon, as it is now, is not bright enough, and they hope this new artificial moon will provide, well, a little more moon light. To discuss this, let's bring in Shweta Chakraborty, Associate Director of the Institute on Science for Global Policy. Shweta, is this even physically possible to send something big enough into orbit that would refract enough light to benefit people on Earth?
Well, you know, it's been tried a few times before. The Russians tried it back in 1993, and so they launched what they were hoping would be an illumination mechanism. And it was basically a large plastic tarp on top of a satellite, and it failed miserably, and then it ended up incinerating in space. And so that didn't work out too well. And then again, earlier this year, the US company Rocket Lab launched what they called the Humanity Star. And the idea was also very similar to that of the Russians and what we're seeing currently with the Chinese. And the idea was for an illumination up in the sky, a second moon, if you will. And that didn't go over well either. They were accused of artificial light pollution, and they were accused of satellite clustering. And so that's the kind of thing that China needs to tread carefully as it looks forward and thinks about how this is going to pan out, how the reception is going to be at home and globally, especially if it's as ambitious as it says it is, and thinks about additional satellites.
Explain, I mean, let's assume, for argument's sake, that they solve the logistics, the physics of getting this thing out there and it doesn't incinerate. What's the concept, though? Is it the idea that you want to provide, I don't know, more solar power on Earth, or that you want to replace? I mean, what's the idea to begin with?
So that's a really interesting question behind what is the motivation. So the motivations across, the three superpowers that are racing for space, if you will, has really been speculated about. What is the reason for it? Are they really trying to make the case for energy savings back home, reducing the use of fossil fuels and needing less electricity and light on the ground? And for that reason, this could be an alternative source for light and then impact the energy in that way. Those are all, laudable efforts. And so if that's the case, then kudos. But what we need to check and see first and foremost is what are the costs associated with it? If that's actually the case, and if we really do see improvements towards energy usage, then are there any costs that offset that? Or really, ultimately, is it are the trade-offs worth putting in the time, investment, capital, human capital, resources into doing it? If those are the motivations, I'm for it. Now, alternatively, if it's just a space race and it's just trying to get to claim more space in the same way that a lot of these superpowers are competing over the Arctic Ocean, for example, and it's really all about who got there first and who did it first and who did it better, that's a different type of motivation. And that's something that we really need to consider because there's political implications here on terrestrial Earth for that.
Sure. Let's assume that this worked and it was put up in orbit. What would people see on Earth? Would they actually see light at a time when they wouldn't normally see it, say at nighttime, or would this be some sort of station like a satellite that you would see and it itself would be collecting light and transmitting the electricity to Earth somehow?
Yeah, and that's a good question. So they're saying, what we're hearing from the Chinese president and those who are working on this over there, the scientists that are leading this initiative, are saying that this is geostationary. So the satellite will really only impact the region that it's intended to impact, and therefore it's not going to be visible necessarily to surrounding nations. That still has yet to be seen. We all can see the moon. It's obviously not going that far, and even though it's brighter than the moon, it is still going to be not that bright to the visible eye. And so we need to see how this actually pans out and what this looks like. What we do know is that the moonlight is really relevant for sleep cycles, for human health, and that's for humans. In addition, animal health and just the environmental ecosystems that are impacted by the relationship to moonlight. We need to think about that and how much the brightness there and the specific impacts it's going to have on the region that experiences that light. Coral reefs will be impacted. Owls, for example, communicate in relation to the moonlight. So these are very real impacts, in addition to, of course, the implications of what this means across nation states.
Yeah, Shweta Chakraborty. Shweta, thanks so much for coming in and explaining this to us. We appreciate it.